Welcome to a Leader's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Joel Gunn, and today I have a new friend with me, Ashley. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Good to have you. So we've known each other now a few months. For those in the audience, Ashley works a couple of doors down from me in a co-working space here in San Antonio, Connected Co-working. Shout out to our sponsors, just kidding. Anyway, in case my friend Brent's listening, the person behind Connected Co-working. Hey, Brent, thanks for setting up this cool space over here.
Hi, Brent. We love you.
Anyway, Ashley, you're director of one nonprofit, executive director of another. Seems like you're always on the go. You want to talk anything about those organizations and what you do there?
Sure. So my focus is on recovery for women. I specialize in helping women find their purpose, overcome trauma, and build a new life after addiction or wherever they might find themselves.
Mm-hmm. Is that both organizations do the same?
Yes.
Okay.
They do similar. So one is a faith-based organization, and the other one is more of a city-based organization. They focus more, Corazon focuses more on homelessness, and we are a program of their organization. And then One Source seeks to restore people to abundance in Christ, connection, and career. So we have more of that spiritual, central theme in our organization, that a relationship with Christ is the most important thing.
And the one organization helps people coming out of addiction find careers?
Yes.
Cool. And how long have you been connected with those two organizations?
I've been with Corazon 2 years, and I've been with One Source since January.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it's that new.
Yeah, it is.
So I met you about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cool. So how'd you end up working for nonprofits in the addiction space?
We're just going to say Jesus laid the foundation. I went to prison in 2017. I came to Grace House and did their 9-month program. I actually lived at Deborah's house, which is the women's home I run with Corazon. And then when I got my trucking license, I still volunteered with women's organizations, and it was always something that was near and dear to me. And my sponsor and I opened a house by ourselves in 2020, and then that house closed, and the opportunity to come along Deborah's house came up, and I love it. Been doing it 3 years now, almost 4, getting to a point where we're advocating. I'm on a team that advocates for new laws in the state, and we're bringing awareness and education around addiction and recovery and what that is and what that means. And I love what I do.
What do you think the biggest misconception is out in the community about addiction or addiction recovery?
About addiction, I would say that, one thing that I've heard at a bike store just down the road from here was a woman made a statement about the homeless people in downtown and how they're all strung out on drugs, when that's not true, right? And so addiction and using drugs has this societal norm of just like we choose this lifestyle. And really it is a trauma response from something that happened. Most of our clients deal with some sort of childhood abuse or something of that nature where they were never able to mature past that trauma. And so doing drugs and being raised in that lifestyle just kind of comes naturally. We're just trying to find a way to not be broken, but we don't have the right tools to get there.
You mentioned a homeless population. That seems to be a topic, seems to be more prevalent in the last few years. I don't know if it is. What did the statistics say? Is it a growing problem?
It is a growing problem, and we have one of the only harm reduction service sites in the state at Corazon, at our harm reduction team. And we are seeing lives changed through relationship. And the homelessness is just a symptom. Like the drug abuse is just a symptom of overcoming trauma. I wish I could give you the statistics, but we met at a summit just a few months ago and ran over some of the statistics. And because the opioid crisis is now shining a light on all of the addiction, they've been listing that as poisonings and deaths. So we don't have real numbers until the last year, maybe 2 years since the opioid crisis, where they're actually tracking numbers of overdoses and not just putting them under a category of poisoning. So there's a lot that goes into bringing that education and awareness.
So the typical homeless person on the street right now, you say large percentage of those they're dealing with some sort of trauma or trying to compensate or overcome a trauma. Did you say a lot of those tend to be childhood traumas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they just continue to, I'm not even sure what the word is, like have an effect into adult years.
Yeah, they do. They carry on. I was listening to K-Love last night, and they were doing some interviews with, not Ransom Life. There's another one through Presbyterian Church that has an organization that is dealing with the trauma and the sex trafficking victims. And one of the survivors was discussing how she thought it was a choice, right? How the people that coerce the women into sex trafficking make them believe that it's a choice. And with that coming in my background, it's, they made me believe that I was doing it of my own free will. It wasn't until I wasn't allowed to leave, I can't go to Lowe's by myself. That's when I realized, hey, there might be a problem here. But that was already 2 years into it. I had no idea. And it's very similar. The trauma happened, I was sexually abused from the time I was 4 until I was 12. And I was never able to fully mature out of that 4-year-old state. There was something missing. I was hiding something. There's an ambivalence that comes with it where it's good and bad. Like it feels good, but it's bad. And so it's almost like a sin that directly affects your heart because you are confused. You don't know what to do with your life. Not saying that all abuses are sexual, especially not with the homeless clients and stuff like that. But there's some gap in the maturity process because we're not nurtured the way we're supposed to as children. And there's a belief that you stop maturing at whatever age the trauma happened. So if you look at it that route, right? So if I was 4 years old and I stopped maturing and developing, I have to go back and I have to deal with all of this trauma from 4 to 12 before I can fully start to mature. And so at 32 years old or 30 years old, I turned 30 in prison, I was forced to deal with it. And so I started using drugs at 14 or 15. So it's almost as if I was 14 or 15 years old when I left prison. And then I could finally start the maturing process. And so a lot of our homeless clients deal with mental health issues. They're not getting the care they need. Maybe they don't have family that can help them. And they're just left out on the streets. There's a lot of elderly too.
When you say left out on the streets, I would say, I don't know if it's most Americans, but there's this thought or belief that's been circulating for a lot of years, again, about, well, it was their choice. They're choosing to live on the streets.
Some of them do choose that lifestyle. But a lot of them are just lost. Broken.
And so do they end up there running away from the trauma? Is that how they end up on the street, so to speak?
It depends. It really depends. It's a case-by-case basis. A lot of them are using to cover up the feelings. I don't want to feel anything. I don't know how to feel these emotions. So they use to cover up. And then if they stop using, they start getting all emotional and acting irrational. And so it's just a horrible cycle.
Is there any hope? I mean, are there programs that are working?
Yeah. Our harm reduction team is actually working. I got to meet a gentleman today that was one of the first clients that got into the medically assisted treatment. He's officially, this was 2 years ago. So he's officially been off of all drugs for the last 70 days. And I got to meet him. He's volunteering today, right? So that was really cool. We love to see those full circle. And then I have a woman from Deb's house that graduated our program, is getting her LCDC in college, and is come back to be a mentor.
When you say harm reduction team, what is a harm reduction team?
So harm reduction does needle exchange. They do education around STDs, HIV, Hep C. They help find treatment for those services. It's really just, if we can't get you to stop, we're at least going to keep you from spreading disease, right? And the people will come in and do their needle exchange on a regular basis, and it creates like this rapport and a relationship. And then when they are ready, they know where to go to get help.
How big is the homeless population in San Antonio? Any clue?
I know they did a count just a few months ago. I'd be lying if I said I knew what the numbers were.
You have a wild guess?
Probably, I mean, we had 1,500 deaths just last year for overdose, or at least that's how many overdose reversals. So I would say anywhere upwards of 3 times that.
Quite a few folks. How's the general community, like? Most people just, oh, there's a homeless people over there, look away. What could really be done about it? I mean, you said you're trying to get some legislation passed. It seems like a problem that society's thrown a lot of money at for a lot of years. What works, what doesn't work?
Recovery housing. And this brings me to recovery housing is so important. Because the structure that we offer in recovery housing, especially like, it's one thing if they're on the street and they want to be there. But then we can get them into treatment. Like, hey, we've got you a bed at this treatment facility. You're going to be there for, 7 to 30 days. Where are they going to go after that? If they don't have somewhere to live that's got a good structured environment that can help them deal with life in a consistent manner for a period of time, they're going to end up right back on the street, and they're going to start using again. And all the money the state just spent for that treatment center for them to have that bed is just getting washed down the drain. So my vision and my goals in life is to create education around the safe, supportive, sober living, where they can get out of treatment. They have somewhere to lay their head. They have accountability. They're required to attend so many meetings, have a mentor. We have house meetings regularly, and we create a new family-like environment of people that are not using, that have never traumatized you, that are here to help you heal, and that community helps to sustain them while they get on their feet. And then most of the time they graduate the program and they move out on their own, and they're reunited with their children, they're reunited with their families. They've built that stable support system to stay clean for the long term, not just to get clean for 30 days.
A lot of people have heard of the 10-step program. Is that, it sounds like what you're describing is earlier in somebody's journey.
Yeah.
So between street and having a job and going to the 10-step program is the recovery house.
Yeah. Transitional. We like to consider it transitional housing,
Okay.
or recovery-oriented housing.
Okay. How long's the typical is there a typical transition period? I mean, is it?
So we recommend 9 to 18 months, and that's what I've really seen to be the sweet spot. If you make it too low, like I've had a woman that did all of her workbook with her mentor in like 4 months, and tried to move out and get her kids back, and it didn't work, and she ended up coming back. Give her 5 more months, and she was able to get her own place, get her kids, and she's still doing well 2 years later.
Wow.
So I feel like the 9 to 18 months is enough time to get through The emotional process takes 4 to 5 months to get set in, like, what am I doing? Where do I want to go? What do I want my job to be? Do I want to go to school for this? Do I want to get a certification in something? Like, what do I want? It's like that dream, waking up that dreamer, like that we were when we were kids. And then once they get into that place where they start envisioning a dream for their lives and wanting something, then they just take off. It's really beautiful.
And it's the first time I've been able to interview somebody that runs in your circles. One of the things I've heard over the years is like, there's so much money in prostitution, for example, that how do you go get a job that pays $8 and $12 an hour when you're used to making way more than that?
Oh, yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
Well, I have firsthand experience on that one. You know, dealing with my trauma as a teenager, I went to college and I was like, yeah, I'm going to party in college. And some of my girlfriends were like, we're going to go do an amateur night at the strip club. They're like, can you drive? You're the only one with a vehicle. Okay, so I drove everyone. And I made like $250 that night, just doing an amateur night. Why do I want to continue to go to like school? Well, I didn't intentionally drop out. It just happened over time. And work at Sonic when I'm having to work, 10-hour shifts at Sonic to make $2.50 an hour. And I'm getting my check every 2 weeks and it's like $100, and I'm making like maybe $30 in tips a day. So, I mean, it barely covered my food. And I was living in a dorm. So, of course, do I want to work 2 weeks for $100 or do I want to work one night for $250? And I mean, within a month, I had lost my scholarship, lost everything, and went into that. And I worked as a dancer for 6 to 8 years of my life. And that's how I got into sex trafficking and escorting. My oldest daughter's dad was a pimp. And he found me in a strip club with another girl that I worked with. And, I mean, they're charging $300 an hour. And if you're high end, it could be even more, upwards of $1,000. I mean, we're seeing congressmen, senators, doctors, lawyers. I mean, all people that are married and have their home lives and want to have fun on the side and do whatever they want to because maybe they're not getting what they think they need at home, right? And it's a whole lifestyle. And then you have these pimps that are offering safety and security, and they're taking half of the girl's money anyway. And then when the girl gets done with the call and goes to the house, they're selling her drugs too. So not only like they're getting her money from her selling her body, they're getting her money from getting her hooked on drugs, right? They're getting money from her for driving her around because maybe she doesn't have a car. And so these women are being enslaved, but it's a choice, right? They're being coerced into it. And even in a strip club where it's legal, right? I made more money in a strip club than I did driving a dump truck, but I made like $200 a day driving a dump truck, $200 to $240, and I made $300 to $600 in a strip club. But I wasn't able to be the mom that I needed to be. And I wasn't able to look myself in the mirror and be okay with it because it always led to something else. It wasn't just, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get myself through college. Like, no, that didn't work. You can't party and do it all at the same time. So there's definitely a balance there. And that's why SA Ready to Work program, where they're offering to pay for those certifications, where the girls aren't being stuck working at Whataburger for $12 an hour, right? They can get a certification in as little as 6 to 8 weeks, get a job making $15 to $20 an hour, and actually be able to support themselves. That's really bringing a big change here in San Antonio for training and education.
And they're going into good jobs, right? Like
Yes.
medical assistant and things like that.
Yeah, we had a girl do phlebotomy, and she's working for a concierge doctor's office, making great money, just moved into her first apartment. We were able to furnish it and everything. So,
Sweet.
yeah.
But how do you educate? I mean, it's tempting, right? Like if you go back and you had walked past me on your way into the club that night, and I'd say, it's not all it's cracked up to be, you would be like, right?
Yeah,
Like,
pretty
how do you, especially when you walk out with $250 at the end of the night, you'd be like, dude, shake that in my face, and I can't make this at Sonic. Is there anything we can do as a society to change it, especially if you got congressmen that are participating in it? Why are they going to put laws in place that make it illegal or impossible for them to have that fun on the side, as you said earlier?
Yeah. And that's one of the things. So I'm meeting with a gentleman I volunteer with for her. And we're a women's empowerment organization. So I run the outreach team, and we actually go into strip clubs once a month. And we take the girls these little pink boxes with a black bow, and it has like some snacks in it, information about, we have a community center, and we just create that rapport and that relationship, right? The relationship is the center of everything I do. And eventually, like when they do decide that maybe they want something different, maybe they want a friend, we're there to assist that. I am meeting with a gentleman later this month about the brokenness of not only the women that are working in the clubs, but the men that are going there also. I met quite a few men who no longer go to the clubs, almost ruin their marriage over it. And they're trying to go back and figure out, why was I doing this? Why was I trying to seek a relationship outside of the sanctity of my marriage when God has given me everything that I needed? And it all stems back from some sort of trauma, either in childhood or later in adult life, that we never processed. So processing those emotions and the stuff that we deal with instead of stuffing it down is really the sweet spot of getting through these issues.
I'm sure psychologists and psychiatrists will hate me asking this question if they're listening.
I am not a doctor.
I know, neither one of us. But based on your experience, are there like major buckets that these traumas tend to fall in? Like you mentioned once already, sexual abuse, but there's obviously others. Do you see, like, are there any, to us casual observers, us novices in this stuff, is there like these big buckets of, well, it's probably either sexual trauma, sexual abuse, or it's this or this or this, and that like 80% of all people?
So they have adverse childhood experiences. And I don't have the list in front of me, but there's like 10 different ones. There's sexual abuse, there's physical abuse, there's verbal abuse, there's if your parents did drugs, if your parents went to prison, and that separation anxiety that comes with that. If you were adopted, given away at birth, there's always something missing. And those are just to name a few. I think that was 6 out of 10. In the Living from the Heart Jesus Gave You, the book that I teach the life model from, there's 2 kinds of trauma. There's type A and type B. Type A is something missing out of your life, and type B is something that happened to you. So like type A could be, we had another child when I was 3 years old, and mom didn't give me all the attention I needed because they were busy with my sibling. And so it's not necessarily that anything happened to you, but maybe you were the oldest child and all the weight got put on you to help with your younger sibling, right? So that could be a type A trauma. And then type B trauma is something happened to you, and you need support and other people to help process those feelings to help you move into the maturity process.
Is this kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy? Like is it a high probability if you had those traumas as a kid, you're going to end up in these situations? Or is it like everybody has that kind of trauma and only a handful end up homeless, or only a handful end up doing drugs? Or any thoughts on that?
That's a good question. I really just believe that it's generational. I do believe that it's generational, especially in my experience. Most of the women that I deal with, or the clients that I deal with, have a generational issue. Like it wasn't, I was just an alcoholic. It was like my parents were alcoholics, my brothers were alcoholics, In my family specifically, my mom was a drug addict. My dad dabbled in drugs. All of my aunts and uncles at some point did drugs. All 3 of my brothers have criminal records and have done drugs. and we still deal with it on a regular basis. But we were raised in a lifestyle where it was okay. And especially with like the 70s and 80s and the whole love, feng shui, let's love everyone and smoke weed all the time.
I think that started in the 60s.
60s, 70s, 80s, the whole era. It was modernized. It was okay. And to be raised in that type of environment, it just makes it easier to go to. So we were never given the tools. I think it's very likely, if you don't have the tools to deal with the emotions, to fall into that.
What about our current culture? A lot of, hey, experiment with your gender, your sexuality, your identity. It's not experiment with drugs, like it was, say, in the 60s and 70s, 80s, whatever. Any concerns? Like, are you seeing any already? Are you seeing any of negative consequences?
Most definitely. I mean, I believe there are two genders, male and female. He created them, God created male and female. I do believe that just like drugs, it's a coping mechanism. A lot of the transgenders that I've spoke to have dealt with the same type of trauma that I did. And they're just trying to deal with their trauma in whatever way makes them feel better. And they're chasing their feelings rather than really unpacking, why am I doing this? And it's becoming a distortion of what is real and what is truth. I think especially as Christians in today's society, it's important for us to remember what the truth is so that we can help process what's going on.
Yeah, so as Christians, we have a truth, a standard. We call it the Bible. But what about non-Christians? Where can they relate or not relate to what you're saying? As far as like, where do they find their truth?
Probably in all of the worldly things. That's a good question. My standard of living is the Bible, for sure.
But when you were in college, was that your source of truth?
No. I experimented with all of those different, I was bisexual for a time, had a girlfriend, the whole 9 yards. But, now in my maturity, I don't seek those types of things.
So let's go back to that time. What did you think you were doing? Did you think you were enjoying the freedom that you had? Did you think you were searching for truth? It wasn't even that deep. It's like, hey, this is fun.
Pretty much. I mean, most college kids are getting drunk and just having fun.
Yeah.
So it was probably more of a just having fun because it was just a phase. And a lot of the issues with the experimenting with, hey, I am a girl and I want you to call me Roy, and that's not actually my name, A lot of it with the kids these days is kind of a phase, but not all of it is.
Some of it's covering up trauma.
Yeah.
So, how old are your kids?
I have a 16-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 6-year-old.
Are you having any of these conversations with them?
Yes. Yes, my daughter is straight, but my daughter is also living on her own. She's 16 years old and she knows everything and she pays her own bills, and we don't have any real legal ground to stand on to make her, enforce our right to be parents. Let me put it that way. My 12-year-old is very much so into sports or getting into sports. His main concern is video games. I think he's only had one crush ever.
Somebody in a video game or real world?
No, real life.
Oh, okay.
Her name was Isabella. I think she was in his 3rd grade class.
Nice.
And then I don't have custody of my 6-year-old. I gave him away for adoption before I went to prison.
What are you telling your 16-year-old daughter and your 12-year-old son about some of the, if they ask you, or if you have an opportunity to talk to them, what are y'all talking about compared to today's culture?
Don't believe everything you hear or see. Like, we tried to convince my daughter to get her to understand the severity of her online stuff, right? We know these kids these days are posting photos of themselves and they're very easy targets for predators. So, as an experiment, I found some guy online I thought she'd think would cute, took all of his photos, created a fake profile, and I friended all of her friends and got her to add me as a friend and started having conversations with her and stuff. And then, like, we caught her doing stuff, and I'd call my dad and be like, hey, she's in her room doing this right now. And, like, it helped us create some accountability with her. And then later on, she found it in my phone, and she was like, that was you? And I was like, yeah, how do you think I was keeping an eye on you? I was like, you blocked me out of all of your social media. I was like, but do you see how easy it is to make you believe a story? And she was like, oh. So now, like, you look on her social media, and she's not doing the same thing that she was.
Interesting.
So it's kind of been that tool to help learn too.
So we could hope that she learned the lesson, or she could have just switched to another social platform.
Yeah, good point.
Sorry. Maybe you never thought about that before.
Oh, no, we thought about that. Yeah, that's why she wanted an iPhone, because nobody can get into an iPhone but her.
Yeah, whatever. That's what all the Apple users want to believe. What are your concerns for your kids as they get older? What kind of world are they going to grow up in or be exposed to by the time they're your age?
They're exposed to a lot more than I was. I mean, I wasn't sheltered, but I was more sheltered than what they are. They know and are already acting as if how I was acting when I was a freshman in college. And they're young teenagers. Mm-hmm. So it's the exposure to the rest of the world is very scary as a parent. But having those conversations and sitting down and, having them express themselves about what's going on and having the real life conversations is important.
What if a parent, like you've obviously educated yourself on a lot of this because of the position you're in now and your desire to your passion to help more people. Most parents don't have the understanding you have in the road to recovery. What would you tell to if there's kind of your average parent listening to this podcast and they're like, I never thought about some of this stuff. I don't even know how I'd have those conversations with my teenagers. Any tips or tricks to
educate yourself?
Okay. But we're 100%. Lazy people.
Educate yourself. Get involved.
Want to watch a podcast if you fix all our problems in the next 3 minutes. So
yeah, that's pretty much what society is these days. Mm-hmm. But getting your kids out where they can volunteer in the community and see some of this stuff is probably one of the best things you can do. Like, hey, if you choose this route, this could be you. Have them serve lunch at the homeless shelter. Have them play Little League with, Miracle League, where they volunteer with the kids that are disabled. That's an amazing experience, right? And like find something they're interested in that they would have a passion for and get them involved in something and use that as an educational tool. And maybe it's an educational tool for you too. It'll give them an outlet that's not behind an Xbox or PlayStation to get out and start developing who they are and who they want to be.
Interesting. What if you find your teenage kid doing something that just like you want to wring their neck, or like that's going to go that's going to go the wrong direction? How have you addressed that with them? Do you just like, obviously you build relationship with the people on the streets, you build relationship with the girls in the clubs. How do you do that with your own kids?
Spending time with them for sure. Setting the boundaries and enforcing them, and making it home in time for dinner. Most definitely. I don't always make it home in time for dinner, but we plan out certain nights where we like make dinner together and we have these conversations. We do something together as a family to try to build that rapport.
So I grew up in conservative household. Yeah, but I heard things over the years like families that have dinner together tend to stay together. Families that play games together tend to. I think even was it one of the big board companies like Milton Bradley or one of those guys years ago released statistics that if you played board games together as a family, and there was all these benefits to it. Have you seen that to be true, or is that?
I have heard that it's true. We always had dinner together when I was a kid. I was conservative household too. And especially since, I have this history over here and I have all of this trauma and extensive, wasn't always a good parent. So the deck is already stacked against me, right? So I'm running uphill the whole time. I'm trying to build rapport and relationship with my kids because they're like, well, you were missing for this part of my life. Like you went to prison and you were a drug addict for 5 years of my life. Like, so I'm having to start from not zero, but like -0. So it's hard. It's hard to have any sort of relationship with your kids if you don't have the structure in your household.
What about, you said something earlier about take them into the community, serving at homeless shelters. What about, you said your son's starting to get into sports. I've probably come from the opposite side where I've seen parents get divorced because they fell out of love, because every night one parent's at this sporting game, the other parent's at that sporting game, then they switch roles the next night, switch roles. And after years of doing that, they're like, they hadn't been on a date in years. They don't know each other.
So that's intentional. My husband and I have been together 14 years. We've only been married 3. But like it's intentional. You don't just fall out of love with someone. You have to water your grass for it to stay green. And so like we have certain nights twice a month or so where we go out, even if it's just to go to Lowe's because he loves doing home projects. And so it's like, go on a date with me to Lowe's, and it's just as simple as like intentionally spending time together.
You get a hamburger on the way to Lowe's? Or
Yeah, on the way back, he's the hamburger.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll call him the Hamburglar.
I just made that up, but apparently a good guess. So that's your date night.
Yeah.
Nice.
But, yeah, we intentionally remember that we're on the same team. And it's something that over the years when you've gone through everything that we've gone through together with both of us getting locked up, him having addictions with alcohol, me with drugs, like we just got to a point when we really when I started seeking the Lord in my life, I started recognizing like, I don't want to fight over this anymore. Like, why are we fighting? We're on the same team. And it's been developed over years where, we know we're on the same team. So no matter what's going on in the world around us, like that's my partner in my life. And we have that understanding. I don't believe you just fall out of love. I believe it's intentional and it takes a lot of work. A lot of work. I'm blessed to have my grandparents just celebrated 56 years.
Wow, congrats.
My parents will celebrate 36 years. I turned 37 in the spring, so they're going to celebrate 36 years right before I turn 37. My aunt and uncle have been married they're still married. Like I'm lucky to be able to have those family values in my life. Yeah.
So even though you grew up with those kind of role models around you in a conservative household, having dinner at the table every night, what you still had those traumas at younger years, and by the time you got to college, you're like party time, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
So do you think your family was kind of intentionally putting on the mask? I mean, was that how looking back did they just think they were average Americans and it's okay to do these alcohol and experiment with drugs and like? Can you look back and see how that?
I mean, my parents still drink and smoke weed. I mean, they do still pretty much live that lifestyle to an extent. My dad's retired. He has a couple of beers. My mom has some wine. And she stopped taking pain pain management medication because of the opiates. And her doctor advised that she smoke weed instead. And so that's kind of, my parents are still kind of old hippies. I do believe that played a role in my life. It's really hard to respect someone who's telling you don't do drugs, don't smoke cigarettes, and don't drink while they got a beer, a cigarette, and a joint in their hand. You know what I'm saying? So, like, if you are trying to teach your children something, you have to be the example. You can't just tell them what to do. It doesn't work that way. And that's, me and my mom fought a lot. My husband and I fought a lot because he was an alcoholic telling me not to take drugs, So I really believe if you want to see a change, you have to be that change.
Is one addiction worse than another?
There's addictions in all arrays. I mean, you can be addicted to food, drugs, alcohol. You could be addicted to porn. I mean, addiction is just taking something to the extreme to where it makes your life unmanageable, is what I believe.
So you don't think one's worse than the other?
No.
Seems like society tries to categorize it like, oh, well, he's only an alcoholic, but he's addicted to drugs. It's like,
no, it's all the same. Just like gambling. Gambling is more, legitimized in certain circles, right? But either way, if you gamble too much, you're still going to lose all your money. You're going to lose your home. You're going to lose everything you have, right? It can still turn into an addiction. It doesn't always have to be substances.
It's interesting. My wife and I just went on a vacation to the New England area. First time we've really spent any time up there. And we toured a castle.
Ooh.
That was built by an American that had 14 years old, started out in the shoe factory. By the time he was 24 or somewhere around there, he owned the shoe factory and then grew it to the largest in the world, 5,000 employees, 6 million pairs of shoes a year, sold it for, in today's money, billions of dollars by the time he was like 30 or 40. Over the next 20 years in today's money, he blew $137,000 a day, every day for 20 years. Now, I don't know. I mean, but the point is,
where is that in our economy right now?
Yeah, that was in the early 1900s, mid 1900s. But it's almost like he, had an addiction to go through that much money and literally was broke when he got to the end. He didn't have any investments, lost the 6,500 acre estate with the castle on it, was penniless, and died penniless. And then his wife was much younger than him. She had to go home penniless.
One thing I've learned, especially since I started walking with God, is fast money falls away fast too. Like I could make $600 at the strip club, and you know what? By the next day, it was usually gone. It would come as fast as it would go. And the Bible teaches me to run the race like it's a marathon, little increments. And with God in my life, I've grown my life in the last 6 years exponentially more than where I was all trying to struggle and doing it on my own and trying to live the fast life. We were never in a position where we are right now. I really believe in the process.
So how does somebody end up in one of your programs? Do they volunteer? Do you find them on the street? Do you find them in a club? Like, how's that typical transition work?
So most of our clients are coming from treatment. So like I said, there being that gap, if they go to treatment and then they don't have anywhere to go, they end up back on the street and back in the drugs. So we have partnerships with a variety of different treatment centers where once they're a few weeks out from graduating, they'll contact us or any other sober living in the city and start the application process. And then once they do the application, I'll usually try to schedule a phone interview with them, bring them by the house, let them see it. Hey, this would be your bed. These are the parameters of our program. are you willing to, commit to this? And we kind of go through that process. It takes a few weeks. And then it kind of weeds out. If they're not really interested, they won't call back, So it's kind of one of those things.
How does the average person, say middle America, that doesn't look at the homeless person when they drive by, is there anything that we can do?
Find people that are doing it and support them in whatever way that means. Whether it's money, whether it's your time, energy, or talents. And get involved with the community that's trying to lift these people up. Because one changed life. Have you heard the story of the starfish? The guy that would walk along the beach and throw the starfish in the water, and he's like, well, it changed that starfish's life, right? And it's like we have a group, we have a team of people that are working with the homeless and addicted clients every single day, and we're overworked beyond. I can't even express to you how heavy our caseloads are, and how much needed it is for someone to just sit down and say, hey, I see you today. Most of our clients don't even know who they are. They haven't had someone look them in the eye and have a conversation with them, and who knows how long, because they're so ashamed of what they've done in their life that they can't even look at themselves in the mirror. So even if it's just as small as looking someone in the eye and saying, I see you today, I mean, it can do wonders.
Wow. How do you keep from becoming overloaded? You personally.
Me personally?
It's so somebody with your passion. I've met lots of folks in my life that are super passionate about something, and it's real easy to get so into that passion that you lose yourself. You don't keep balance. How does Ashley keep from getting burnt out, as we like to call it?
Well, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes, when it's slow, like over the summer, I only had like 5 or 6 women in a home that holds 12. My assistant left and moved away, got married and moved away. My house manager moved out and got her own place, and it was just me and these 5 women. And it was a whole transition back to me doing everything on my own, and I got overwhelmed. I did quite a bit, and I had to take a step back and start turning my phone off when I go home. Like, I will leave it on silent because this is my time with my family. And it started being an intentional, when I'm at home, and I want to be just as present with my family as I am when I'm not, and recognizing that, I need to take that space too. And even the waking up in the morning and getting that 30 minutes to an hour where I get to drink my coffee and just be by myself before everyone wakes up and the dogs start barking. That kind of stuff keeps me grounded to where I'm able to hold my cool. But yeah, it's intentional. We plan vacations. Like, I know I'm going to have the craziest next 2 months, so I have that vacation planned for Thanksgiving to go visit other family. So, yeah, it's definitely intentionally setting and recognizing my own triggers.
Well, that's good advice, especially for business people, because I'm just sitting here thinking, I mostly in the business community is where I spend my time. And it's so easy for business people to say, well, I just got to take this call during dinner, darling, family. Sorry, guys, it's really important. It's a big client. Like, you're talking about people's life, and you're forcing yourself to put your phone on silent and not take the call. Like, literally life-changing versus, just exchanging for another dollar. So hope my business friends that are tuned into the podcast take a clue from Ashley. If you can, as passionate as you are about actually changing somebody's life forever, and you can turn off the phone for a little while.
And I can't teach my women to take care of themselves first if I don't do it myself too. Right? Like, so many of them have CPS cases and want their children back, but I'm like, well, if you can't take care of you, How can you take care of anyone else? So I have to recognize that if I can't take care of me, I can't help anyone.
That's good. What's our, let's say somebody's listening to the podcast and they say, Ashley, that's, as I'm listening to you talk, it's really ringing true in my heart. What would be their next steps, right? We talked earlier about just for the average Joe, what they might be able to do, but let's say somebody really, some of what you said resonated with them. Either they had that lifestyle or they had that trauma. Maybe they're in a better place in life and they said, hey, I want to get involved at a deeper level. Where could they go? What resources are out there to start that conversation?
Specifically, what kind of resources? Are you talking about counseling, therapy?
No, I mean, more like somebody that says, hey, I got my act together.
Involved? Yeah.
Right. That's always dangerous to say. But they're in a good place in life, but they want to give back to the community. And they're like, hey, I'm ready to dive in, at a deeper level. Come, not just write a check to a charity, local nonprofit, but they're like, I want to go volunteer sometime, or I want to go work in the strip clubs, or I want to, where would they, what should they process, or where would they go next? What questions do they need to ask themselves? Let's go there first.
Oh, that's a good one. I would really take a strong inventory of where you've been in your life. And, God uses everything for the good of those who are called according to his purpose, right? And he plans to prosper us. At the same time, I remember crying out to God and saying, why me? Why am I dealing with this right now? And if you've ever had a time in your life where you wanted to cry out to God and say, why me? Why am I dealing with this in my life right now? Take an inventory, find that moment and what you were dealing with in that moment, and Google something that has to do with whatever situation was going on. And there is practically an organization for everything, for grief, for trauma, for counseling, for, sex trafficking, for the homeless, and finding purpose in your story and giving something that was hard for you to go through, meaning. And that's how we find purpose. That's the only way I've been able to find purpose in the majority of issues I've had in my life.
That's good. That's good. Any final thoughts as we start to move toward a close?
I'm just real grateful to be here, excited about where recovery is going to lead in the future, what that means, because you can be in recovery and never even touch a drug in your life. It's just a lifestyle of wanting something different today than what I had yesterday. And it is a lifelong process of recovery, and it's different for everyone. And like you were talking about, find your truth, find what you need to recover from and do a little work. And I think the whole world would be a better place if we all focused a little bit more on our recovery, how we can help others.
That's good. Ashley, it's been an honor having you here today.
Yay.
Thanks for coming out. Appreciate you.